What is up, YouTube? It is Montana with Sawyer's Garage, back at you with another how-to video. Today I've got my 2007.5 GMC 3500 Duramax, and what I'm going to be doing today is installing a Raptor 4G lift pump, 150 gallon per hour lift pump. The reason why I'm going to be installing a lift pump on this today, if you don't know, you should probably do if you're looking at this video, Duramaxes from the factory do not come with any sort of lift pump to help aid the fuel from the tank getting up to your injection pump. So on these, your injection pump is required to suck all the fuel it needs up to the engine, which under stock application, people still recommend that you put a lift pump on them, like for durability long term. But for stock application, isn't necessarily required. The truck obviously runs fine without one. What I'm running into issues with, and maybe you're doing the same, the truck, I deleted the truck. So this has no emission systems. Whenever you delete the truck, you have to get it tuned. So the tunes that I have 5 different tunes, and they range anywhere from a 30 horsepower increase up to like 150 horsepower increase, which is pretty crazy. And basically the way it does that is by injecting more fuel. Where you have issues on this stock trucks, when you're just running your stock fuel system and you don't have any lift pump, is your CP3, your injection pump, can't suck enough fuel to keep it satisfied. And so what you end up with is you'll end up on your dash, you'll see change fuel filter light come up. And that's because your actual fuel pressure is lower than your desired fuel pressure. And so the truck, thinking, obviously I'm stock because nobody's going to modify a Duramax, says fuel filter must be restricted. I'm not seeing the fuel pressure I need. When in reality, it's because I'm trying to push an extra 150 horsepower through stock fuel system. So the lift pump is supposed to supply the injection pump with basically all the fuel it could need. This one's 150 GPH. They have a 100 GPH model, which honestly I probably could have gotten away with because I'm still running stock injectors, stock CP3. That being said, I thought in the future, in case I ever want to go to like some 30 overs and maybe a larger CP3, I'm kind of already there fuel-wise. Now this lift pump's a little different than the ones that you probably are used to seeing. And follow me over here. This is the box that Airdog sent me. So this is an Airdog brand. Raptor is calling it. This is just the pump, guys. I don't have my razor knife to just pull this out real quick. The ones that you're used to seeing are going to be the ones with the pump kind of mounted sideways, and there's going to be 2 filters coming down. That's the standard version that you're used to seeing. I really didn't have to want to worry about 2 extra filters. When I do still have the stock filter up in the engine bay. A lot of people hate the stock filter, mainly the filter head, because it has O-rings that can leak, and that is always a possibility that can cause an issue, whether this was stock or modified. And a lot of times when you have the lift pump with the 2 filters, you would delete that. That being said, you lose its ability to self-prime, things like that. So I'm going to leave the stock filter head on the truck, leave the stock filter on the truck, because in my opinion that AC Delco filter has water separation. Obviously it filters out the fuel. This truck's got 312,000 miles and it's worked fine for 312,000 miles. So I'm going to leave it as is. Thus I actually saved a couple $100 by getting just a pump. So today's video, long story short, installing this pump on my LMM Duramax, and hopefully that'll help. I tried to YouTube it. I couldn't find a single video of anybody installing this on a Duramax. I could find tons of videos of the normal dual filter lift pumps, just none of the Raptor 4G. Now Fast is kind of, if you don't have an Airdog, you have a Fast. Fast has their own version of this as well. Obviously not wanting to let Airdog handle one portion of the market without them. So I don't know what's going to be required on the Fast, but my guess is they're going to be very similar. So this video may help you with either or, but focusing mainly on the Airdog Raptor lift pump. So without further ado, we are going to go ahead and get started. Okay guys, so I'm going to be honest with you. this is the first one I've done. I've not installed one of these before. So this how-to video is going to be me literally going step by step through the instructions, showing you guys what's next. So this video may be a little lengthy because of that, but at the same time, if you're looking at installing this, I find oftentimes the longer that they are, the better, because then you can just kind of skip to wherever you either need help with, or you can, hey, I'm going to watch this 40-minute long video tonight, and then I'm going to order it tomorrow, or I'm going to install it tomorrow. That way you know exactly what's going on. But I'm going to go down the list of the install instructions, and that's how I'm going to do things. So the number one, basically where it starts off at, is you see it's got these red caps in here. Looks like they just unscrew. I'm going to leave it. First thing they want you to do is take your bag of goodies here, and you got these aluminum fittings. One here and one here. One is larger than the other, so it's going to be pretty self-explanatory. But what they want you to do is to go ahead and thread these on and torque them down. And they give you the torque spec. So this small one is going to be torqued to 10 foot-pounds with a 3/4 inch deep socket. This larger one is going to be torqued to 15 foot-pounds with a 7/8 deep socket. It looks like they do have some oil, or maybe some diesel, maybe some oil in there. Obviously, they probably have tested this pump, or maybe it's part of the priming system to get the pump spinning and building pressure right off the bat. So I'm going to go ahead and grab some sockets real quick, give them a torque wrench, and I'll be right back. Now I'm hoping, since this is only 10 foot-pounds, I'll just be able to do this here by hand. Perfect. Now I got to find my 7/8. Shouldn't be too hard. I just had that out the other day. Somewhere. Uh-oh. Took it. So if you don't have 7/8, if you have, so a 3/4 is a 19 millimeter, a 7/8 is a 22 millimeter. So if you may not have a 3/4, but you have a 19, you're in the clear. Basically the same if you don't have a 7/8, but you have a 22, you're in the clear. 22. I'll take it. And this one, we're going to 15. Which isn't, super tight, but these do have a rubber O-ring on them. We're good. All right, guys. So for this next step, it's basically mounting your lift pump to the frame rail. Now, this is what they've given us to mount it with. Ignore, I got some of the oil that they put inside of here on this mounting plate. So what you're going to notice is you have 4 small cap screws that are not very long, and they have a tapered end. You're going to have 4 long cap screws that are basically the same, they're just longer. And the reason they do that is because they don't know if you're going to have brake lines, like depending on where you're putting it. If you're going to have brake lines, you're going to need to spacer it out. So they give you a spacer, and that spacer will end up going off the back of the pump like that, and thus you get these extra long bolts. If you don't have any brake lines, fuel lines to contend with right there, you don't need the spacer and you don't need the long bolts. You can toss those aside, you won't need them. You can just use the short ones. Now, you've got 2 metal plates. You see this one has a whole bunch of holes on it. On the back side of that, they're tapered. So you're probably already figuring out what's happening there. Your taper goes to your taper. This right here allows you to determine the best mounting location, up or down, to your frame rail. So these 2 holes right here will be the top, and this plate right here will go on the outside of your frame rail. This will go on the inside. You will sandwich your frame rail with this piece right here. And then from there, you will determine the best location, height-wise, to install your lift pump. And then that right there is the point where if you need the spacer, you would use the spacer behind here in order to mount that in. This would go behind your fuel lines, your brake lines, whatever, mounts through the frame, utilizing the 3 of these bolts. Each of them has a lock nut, each of them has a lock washer and a nut. So real simple. So you'll find where you want it, you'll sandwich this through the frame, you'll eyeball exactly what holes you want these to be, then you'll kind of pull it back apart, bolt your lift pump together, and then at that rate, we'll be able to move on to the next step. That's going to be hard to relay underneath the truck when I'm under there, so I kind of wanted to show that to you off the truck, and then once it's done under the truck, I'll show you it again. But I just kind of wanted to be able to hopefully illustrate this out here in plain sight and make it a little easier for you to understand exactly what's going on here. So very simple, plain plate with no extra holes is your outside plate. This will sit outside your frame rail, closest to the outside of your truck. This plate will sit on the inside of your frame rail. It's going to sandwich your frame rail right in the middle, and then you'll determine if you need the spacer or not, and you'll bolt your lift pump up at any of these different heights. The higher up you can get it, the better. You don't want it sitting too low, or it becomes something that can get snagged and caught on things. So the idea is that you can get this up as high as you can with what your setup is. Obviously, they want one kit to work on a ton of different trucks. Thus, you get things like this, whereas if this was, hey, this right here is made for your 2007 extended cab, long box, GMC Sierra Duramax pickup, this wouldn't have multiple holes. It would just have one set. But since this is meant for, 01 to 2010 Duramax, and maybe this kit works on something else, you end up with kind of this adjustability. So hopefully that makes sense. I'm going to go ahead and start getting under the truck and seeing what I can get figured out on my personal truck here. And then once I kind of have an idea what's going on, I will get back with you guys and show you what's up, and we'll go from there. All right, guys, so I've got it mounted, and on my application, I was able to use literally the bottom 4 holes to mount it, and I did not need the spacer. Let me see if you can tell. There's 2 bolts up at the top that are sandwiching that plate. I slid it in there behind that harness. And 1 bolt at the bottom. You see the in port, which is where fuel will come in. And then obviously on the other side is the out port, where fuel will head towards the engine. So now that it's mounted, we can move on to the next step. I just kind of wanted to show you guys what I ended up with here at the frame. And the only thing I had to contest with was the brake line. And what I do is I kind of just gave it a little bit of a bend, kind of away. And as of right now, it seems to be clearing and not touching anything, so it shouldn't cause any issues in the future. If that was touching, you would definitely need to put something like an isolation, something rubber, to isolate that between that bracket. Otherwise, you could end up rubbing through your brake line, going back to your rear wheels, which means your pedal is going to sink to the floor very fast. So that is the end of this step. So I will pick up with the next step. All right, guys. So our next step is going to be routing our fuel line. So basically, what's required here is we have to disconnect the suction line, which is basically the line from the tank to the engine. There's a factory flexible line that runs from the tank. It flexes to the rigid line on the frame. And so that section of line is actually going to come off, and we're going to basically attach from where it comes on top of the tank, and we're going to attach it to our lift pump. Now in the kit, you get 3 of these. It's basically a quick disconnect for the factory fitting. Really super common. If you were to ever try to remove one, you basically have to push in along these right here, which would spread that out, which will allow you to pop this free. But this will click right into your factory connections, which is really nice. You have 3 straight ones. You have one that's angled. I believe the angle one will end up going right off of the lift pump. And these ones, well, one of them will go off the lift pump as well. But what they do tell you in the instructions to do is, and what we're going to do is, we just took a water bottle and a razor knife. We just cut a little portion off. We've got a little bit of oil left over from when we did an oil change on the Toyota 2 weekends ago. You don't need a whole lot, but here's what they're telling you to do: is you're going to pour a little bit of oil, and you're going to take motor oil, and you're going to, I'm not going to do it right now because I'm not quite ready, but you're going to lubricate these barbs with motor oil. And you see there's 1, 2, and 3. And the instructions, you do not use hose clamps. They don't want you to use hose clamps on these at all. They say lubricate it, push it past those 3 barbs until it seats all the way up against that shoulder. When you do that with the oil, you got it. It's not coming off. So understand that you have to make sure that you get it fully seated. If you don't, you might have issues, but they do not want you to use hose clamps. And the reason why is a hose clamp over time will cut into the line. Now, that being said, people use hose clamps on hose, it makes sense. So I guess use your own discretion. That being said, a hose clamp on a plastic nipple is typically not the best idea. So I'm just going to go with their instructions. I'm going to lubricate these. I want to make sure that they seat all the way up. And then at that rate, we'll have it. Won't have to worry about hose clamps, which honestly sounds easy to me. The tool you're going to need, kind of a specialty tool if you don't have it. This is a fuel line disconnect tool. Real simple. You can get, there's a couple different types. This one I think is a Lyle brand. I bought it in a kit. Has multiple. I bought this several years ago. Don't use it a whole lot, but when you need it, you need it. They're not super expensive. Buy a kit, hang on to it, but you're going to need the 1/2 inch one. So if you could potentially, I guess, order one individually, order a 1/2 inch tool. In my opinion, I'd like to see maybe them include it. Since it's just a single size, save you from buying the set, that'd be kind of nice. That being said, maybe they weren't able to locate just one, or they figured you're going to take this to your mechanic, he's going to have the tool, why include another one, which I get that as well. That being said, this kit is easy enough you should be able to do in your driveway. So if you don't have one, you work on cars, get yourself a fuel disconnect tool, but 1/2 inch is the size we're going to need here today. And so I just kind of wanted to go over that real quick. That way I don't have to kind of illustrate what's going on in that regard. But what I am going to do is get back underneath the truck, show you guys the suction line we're going to be disconnecting, get that out of the way so we can keep rocking and rolling. So I will be right back. All right, guys, bear with me here. I am on a creeper under the truck. So the line, it's pretty bright, that we need to disconnect is going to be this big line. You can see the one connection right there. I'm going to put my finger on it. That big line basically is your suction line up to the engine. So you have to disconnect it from that side. And then they were really kind, at least on mine, they run it all over creation. I apologize, you're not seeing nothing right now, but I found, I can't see it, I can kind of start to see it again right there, but I think I can get to it if I come back to the other side of the drive shaft, reach up over my exhaust, and basically right above the sending unit for the tank, there it is again. So I should be able to disconnect it from up there, pop it off the tank, and then disconnect it at that first spot I showed you, and remove that suction line without hopefully having to drop anything or making way. It shouldn't be too big a deal, but I did kind of want to show you guys those are the lines we're going to be taking off. So basically just that big thick line is the one we're working with. 1/2 inch tool, press into the fitting, should pop it loose. And be prepared, you will spill some diesel when you go to do this, because there's going to be diesel in that tube running all the way up to your engine. It will not be under any particular pressure. except for anything that gets broke loose is going to come running back down towards you due to gravity. So just know that you're going to lose some diesel when you go to do this. So not really much else you can do about that. So all right, guys, so I was able to finally get that suction line off the bottom of the truck there. Basically the way it routes, this one right here is the one that you can see pretty easy from the front of the tank. This one, it kind of comes up here and then goes into the top of the tank. This one was a real pain in the butt. I think I had a bunch of dirt built up that was making it difficult to get my tool in there, but I was going to kind of show you what this tool is doing. So obviously there's a barbed end. I don't know how well you can see inside of there, but there's a barbed end that's locked in with these tabs. This tool, you go over the hose and you press in. And when you press in, you basically compress those barbs all the way outside, and then you're able to pull the hose back out. And so if there's a bunch of dirt built up in there, you may struggle actually just getting the tool inside the hose. It did take quite a while in order for me to make that happen. So maybe word to the wise, maybe take like a can of brake cleaner or something with some safety glasses and maybe try to shoot that out. If you can, it's not at a good angle to get to. That being said, I was able to get it. I almost dropped the drive shaft just to get myself a little more room under there, but ultimately I was victorious. So yeah, that's about it. So that's out of the way now. So what I'm doing right now is I'm about to go underneath the truck and hook up some fuel lines. And so I will have the camera under there and I'll show you guys what I'm doing. Okay, so things are getting a little tight under here right now. Just trying to keep everything going. But basically what I'm going to be doing now is I'm going to be taking my out barb right here. And there's the 90-degree quick fit attachment deal. And basically this is going to go on this side. Push it on so you didn't get it all the way seated. You should hear it click. Alright, that was a very good click. Now since that's my out, I now need to hook it back up to the metal fuel line that's going up to the engine. So that one right there that I disconnected. So I'm going to cut my hose to size, and then I'm going to take this Barb Fitting, and then it will go back on there. And so that's what I'm going to do next. And then I'm going to do my inside, to my end portion, which means I'm going to take my one of my other Barb fittings, and I'm going to attach it onto the top of the fuel tank. I want to run that hose all the way over to my end barb. And basically it's going to be able to suck fuel into itself from the tank, out of the lift pump, back to the fuel rail here, or to the fuel line that then runs up to the engine. So real simple. Basically I'm starting with just one end connected. That way I can make sure I just cut my hoses at a good length that allows me to be able to zip tie them up out of the way, but also have plenty of room. So that is what I'm going to be doing, and I will show you guys once I am done. Guys, we are hooked up fuel wise. Let me grab my flashlight, get a better angle. Okay, so I got my in hooked up to the tank. I got my out hooked up to the line on the frame rail running up to the engine. So fuel wise, it is mounted and plumbed. The next thing I have to worry about is the wiring, which do come with the wiring harness. So I will show you guys that, and I'll be right back. All right, so the next step, guys, now that I've got it mounted to the frame, I've got the fuel lines connected, is I got to get power to it. Now they send us a harness that's already pre-made. Looks to be pretty simple, really simple. You're sending the unit power and ground, and that's it. And that power and ground is running through a 25 amp fuse that they put inside of a holder that you can then screw in somewhere. And then the only thing you have to do is you have to ground it out. So they give you an eyelet right here. You can ground this out straight to the battery. You can ground this out to the alternator, or you can ground this out to the frame. And then they give you a red wire that has nothing on the end. But in that baggie of goodies I had earlier, they did give me a male spade connector. And what they want you to do with this, they want you to open up the fuse box. Find on the fuse box under the hood a power source that has power only when the key is on. You want that power source to turn off with the key. So you can use a test light or a meter. I might use a test light if I can find mine, otherwise I'll use my meter, but I'd like to show you guys basically the process of finding that. But really simple. I'm going to run this down the frame rail, plug it into my lift pump. They give you a bunch of zip ties. You zip tie it up along the way. This is going to run up into the engine compartment where I will find a place to mount this potentially, as well as I will go ahead and ground out my ground wire, and then I will tune in and show you guys where I'm tapping in for my power. So stay tuned. I'm going to go ahead and route it. I think you guys can figure that out, but then I will show you where I found my power here in just a second. Okay guys, so back with the next / last step. You should have just routed your wiring down, clicked it into the pump, secured it with zip ties all the way up to the engine bay. Thus, what you're left with when you get up here is you need to ground out the ground. I kind of cheated. Oop, let me get my flashlight, guys, so you can see what I'm looking at. And I just went ahead and grounded mine right to the negative battery right there, just unscrewed that terminal. If I had another nut, I could have put it right there. Honestly, probably would have been even easier, but I didn't have one, so that's a no-go. And then what I end up doing to find a place to put the fuse is they give you just a male spade connector. I wasn't actually 100% sure where they wanted me to hook that into because none of these slots are wide enough for a male spade connector. So what I actually end up doing, utilizing what we call an ATA fuse. And if you guys aren't familiar, this is kind of what they look like. Very simple. And if you haven't dealt with these, you should get familiar if you like doing automotive wiring. So basically you remove the fuse that is powered on with the key. It has to be powered on with the key. If it's powered constant, then your lift pump will never shut off. It will kill your battery. Basically no good. So what I end up finding worked on mine is the let's see, which one was it here, number 14 on my list. If you guys can see that, it says diesel ECM 25 amps. So this setup, it has its own 25 amp fuse, which I routed around the side. I just brought my harness up around the back of the fuse box to kind of waste some space. I hooked up my ground, and then I'm running my power wire up and over here. And so I pulled that fuse out. I took the 25 amp fuse from that circuit and I plugged it into the very first slot here, because basically that's going to be my main circuit. This is just taking extra power on top of it. But the beauty is that extra power has its own fuse source, so if it ever pulls more than what the circuit is capable of, it will blow its own fuse, ideally. So otherwise, I hope I carry spare fuses with me, but this is pretty standard, and it's pretty rare that that pump is going to try to pull 25 amps unless maybe your diesel gels up and it literally can't spin. That's typically about the only thing that's going to cause them, or if the motor were to ever just fail. But typically it means the motor can't spin if you're going to be pulling that much amps. Typically you're going to run way less amps than that, so shouldn't ever be an issue under normal circumstances. So basically, with my ATA fuse that I have installed, I removed the fuse. I took my standard 25 amp fuse from that circuit and I placed it into that first slot, and then I actually took a 30 amp fuse here, mainly because I don't need the extra 25 amp circuit protection right here because I already have it in line. So this will just prevent this fuse from ever getting blown and ever becoming an issue for me. Real simple. And then I just crimped it right onto the end of that power wire, guys. So now I can take this, already verified this as key on with the meter, which is also really basic. You just take one end of your meter and you hold it to your negative terminal on your battery. And then you come across, and on tops of all these fuses, they have these little metal points. If you take your meter that's on volts DC with your negative battery held to there and you touch these points, you're looking for one with the key off that does not have 12 volts on it. If the fuse is not blown, then you'll have 12 volts on either of these 2 points. If a fuse is blown, you'll have voltage on one point but not the other. And so if you're ever trying to check fuses, that's a good way to do it. Basically, you hold and you just kind of come through here. There's actually times if I'm diagnosing a vehicle, I will come through and check every single fuse in the fuse box by just basically doing that and touching my leads to every single point. But basically, fuse is good. So very simple. This did not come in the kit. Like I said, the only thing they gave me was a male spade connector, which I was not sure exactly where they were wanting me to put that. So I knew I had these from different automotive projects, and they're kind of just the way to go. So in my opinion, if you're ordering this offline, you may go over to Amazon and look up an add-a-fuse, I believe is what they're calling them. Very simple, very effective for adding circuits. I installed heated seats in a previous vehicle of mine, and I actually used this coming off of a wiper circuit in order to power the heated seats. So it does work well, and it can hold up to some amperage. I haven't had any failures with any of the ones that I've installed yet. So now that I am wired up, we just have to test it, make sure it works. So Josh, would you like to go ahead and just turn the key over? Not start it, but we're just going to turn the key over. Alright, so I can hear it. I'm gonna you may not be able to see nothing, but you can hear it running. As long as the key is in the power position, even if the truck's not running, I've set power to my lift pump. So it is now pumping fuel up to the engine. At a certain point, the fuel would be able to return back to the engine via the engine circuitry, I believe. That being said, you also want to make sure you have no leaks. Now I've actually already fired this thing up once to verify, so I have no leaks. But you want to go ahead and let this thing prime for a couple seconds. You'll actually hear a difference in tone when it finally hits engine prime where you want it. Because I can actually flip the camera towards me. Once it hits engine prime, you'll hear the pump kind of hit a different tone. And at that point, you are ready to go ahead and try to start it. So go ahead and do so. Starter. Obviously she caught right up, and at this point, the only thing we have left to do is to go ahead and test drive it and make sure that it works the way I want it to. But other than that, I'm going to button up the fuse box and we're going to go take her down the road. But that was the install. It really wasn't too bad. Now that I've done one, I know I could do another one way quicker. Not a whole lot of like difficultness to it. Just sometimes you may run into some things that are a little stuck, things like that. So I apologize, I'm a little dirty. But we're going to go road test this thing, make sure it solved my concern, and then we'll be back, just kind of wrap it up. What's up guys, Montana Sawyer's Garage back again with my update here on my lift pump install. It is the next day if you couldn't tell. We actually just got done playing a little bit today and realized we never filmed the outro for it. So we did go and test drive it. It is taking care of my concern of the change fuel filter light coming on every time I get on it. So that was my issue, is I just wasn't getting enough fuel up to the engine to handle my aftermarket tunes. Now that is good to go. Doesn't seem to be a problem anymore. So I've been driving it around and probably put about 100 miles or so on it already today, and it has been flawless so far. So I think it was a good investment for me. And if you have the same setup I do, where you deleted your vehicle, then you got tunes, and now you're having some performance issues, I highly recommend it. If you don't want to go with the full setup, you want to go something maybe a little cheaper, the Raptor lift pump gets an A from me, and I think if you get it, you won't be disappointed. So at this point, it wasn't terribly hard to install. The only thing that I differentiated from the instructions is I use the add-a-fuse. Highly recommend you use the add-a-fuse to power it. But other than that, installation instructions were great. They basically showed you exactly what you need to do. Hopefully my video will help you understand exactly what you should be doing and make it a little easier for you on how to install this onto your Duramax. But at this point, I'm happy with it. I'm gonna keep testing it, and if I have any issues with it, I'll let you guys know. If I don't have any issues with it, if you guys remind me in a couple months, I'll do a follow-up video, let you know how things go in a couple months. But as of right now, it's been working perfectly for me, and I've got no complaints. So I'm excited. I finally got my truck back where I want it, deleted, tuned, lift pump now. So she runs pretty good, even on tune 5. If I go any higher, I'm gonna have to do something with the transmission. So at this point, I'd usually just run it around tune 3, just for my around town cruising. But it is solid. I'm happy with it. Thus, I think this video is over. So I appreciate you guys for watching. Please like and subscribe. It helps me out quite a bit. Other than that, I will catch you guys next time. Thank you.